He fired me at 10:04 a.m. By 10:15, half the company's recurring revenue had walked out the door behind me. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. I knew something was rotting the moment the new COO, Chad Whitmore, MBA, self-proclaimed disruptor and walking Red Bull ad, stood in front of the department heads and used the phrase synergizing our core verticals with a straight face. If corporate jargon were a cologne, that man bathed in it. Everything about him screamed bluff and bluster. But upper management ate it up because he'd once sold a struggling Saw-S company for a profit big enough to fund his ego for the next decade. I'd spent 9 years building client solutions from duct tape and handshakes into the company's golden goose. We didn't just handle clients, we kept them. Landed whales, onboarded them cleanly, renewed them annually like clockwork. I knew every account manager's kid's name, had lunch once a quarter with our legacy clients, and kept an open Slack line with our CFO during quarterly projections. We weren't flashy. We were foundational. But foundational doesn't look exciting on a pitch deck, and I wasn't blonde, 30, or interested in calling Chad visionary for suggesting we switch to an AI chatbot that misspelled our own company's name. So when I got wind he was planning a restructure, I knew exactly whose head was on the chopping block. And no, I didn't panic, because when you've been gaslit long enough in corporate America, you learn to prepare in silence. I'd done my homework years ago, but more on that in a bit. Side note, if you're still listening and haven't hit that little subscribe button yet, go ahead and do it. I promise the payoff's better than your last team building retreat. Plus, it keeps the team who helps me bring these stories to life caffeinated and marginally sane. Seriously, it means a lot. Back to Chad. He started by streamlining 2 junior analysts who I personally mentored. The kind of folks who stayed late without being asked and never once complained about Excel eating their souls. When I pushed back, he smirked and told me it was time to get lean and agile. I asked if that included firing himself for duplicating roles. He didn't laugh. One afternoon, I was reviewing our quarterly retention metrics, 92%, thank you very much, when I overheard Chad in the hallway joking with legal that I still thought she was running a fiefdom. That's when I knew it wasn't a matter of if, but when. So I pulled up the digital copy of my original service agreement, highlighted a paragraph deep in the boilerplate section, and smiled. Most people don't remember that I never came in as a standard hire. When the company first wooed me away from my boutique consulting firm, I negotiated my role through Diana Farrell Consulting LLC. That was back when the company was 5 years from profitability and desperate for growth. They needed my contacts, my client list, and my operational strategy. But they didn't want to deal with a C-suite title. So we compromised. I'd act as director of client solutions, but all agreements would be routed through my firm. That way they could pay me like a vendor, avoid certain liabilities, and I'd keep control of how I built my team. And I did build a team. Carefully, quietly. With contracts signed the same way through my firm, one by one. No fanfare, no grandstanding. Just signatures and clauses no one in legal ever bothered to flag, because I kept everything efficient and under budget. Still, that last month, the tension thickened. Chad kept popping into my team's meetings like a kid who just learned how to knock. He'd ask dumb questions with PowerPoint energy, then leave before the answers got complex. And when I brought up long-term client roadmaps at the executive roundtable, he waved it off like I'd suggested we bring back fax machines. The final straw? He called my department legacy bloat during a strategy offsite, in front of everyone. No one laughed, no one spoke. Just the gentle hum of catered sandwiches being chewed by people too scared to blink. I went home that night, fed my cat, poured a glass of wine, and typed a single text to my second-in-command: review the contracts. She replied with 3 words I already did. I slept like a baby. They called it a reorg. As if dressing a firing in a euphemism made it something other than a corporate mugging in broad daylight. The invite hit my inbox at 8:42 a.m., subject line, realignment strategy discussion. Sender, Chad Whitmore, CC'd, HR, no agenda, just a room number and a time. 9 o'clock sharp, like they couldn't wait to get it over with. I didn't flinch, I didn't forward it. I didn't ask my assistant to move some things around. I shut my laptop, tucked my phone in my blazer, and walked to the room like it was just another Tuesday, which in a way it was. Just one with a body count. The conference room smelled like betrayal and cinnamon gum. Chad was already seated, arms crossed like he was posing for a LinkedIn article titled How I Fired a Legend Without Flinching. HR sat next to him, Melissa from compliance, blinking too fast and sipping from a Be Kind mug like she didn't just walk into an execution. Diana, Chad said, gesturing like I should be grateful. Thanks for coming on such short notice. I sat, not because he told me to, because I wanted to. He slid a folder across the table, sleek black, company branded, as if corporate death should arrive in luxury packaging. We're restructuring. New leadership, new direction, less redundancy. So redundancy was my new title. He leaned back, hands clasped behind his head like he'd just solved world hunger. Your team is ours now. I didn't blink, just opened the folder. Termination letter, check. Final paycheck, check, and there it was, A generic non-compete agreement, PDF printed and stapled like it wasn't about to collapse under its own legal incompetence. He was still talking. Something about continued respect, paving the way for future growth, appreciating my contributions. It was corporate jazz, words meant to sound good while meaning absolutely nothing. I looked him dead in the eye. I won't be signing this. Melissa gasped, the kind that comes from HR training modules warning about difficult exits. Chad scoffed like he'd been waiting for that line. You do understand this is standard procedure? And you do understand I never signed a standard agreement. I folded the non-compete once, slowly, and slid it back across the table like a bill at a restaurant I didn't order from. He blinked, twice. Then his mouth twitched like he was trying to remember if he had authority or just the illusion of it. I stood. Melissa began her "You have 30 minutes to collect your." "No need," I said, voice flat as winter asphalt. "I travel light." I walked out without looking back, not because I was dramatic, because I'd already packed my real things, my leverage, my team, my clients, months ago. Everything else was just desk clutter and office plants too smart to die under fluorescent lights. The hallway felt longer than usual, like it was stretching on purpose. Half my team was out at client sites. A few were behind glass walls, pretending not to see what was happening. But I caught a glance from Brian, senior manager, 7 years under me, loyal to the bone. He gave the smallest nod, just once, like a soldier confirming coordinates. By the time the elevator doors opened, I already had my phone in hand. No tears, no rage, just one message, one word, to the group thread labeled DFC Core. Now, I hit send, stepped into the elevator, and let gravity pull me toward the exit, slow and inevitable, just like what was about to happen upstairs. The lobby was quiet, too quiet for Wednesday morning. You know that moment in a horror movie right before the creature pounces? That hush where even the vending machines stop humming? That's what it felt like when the elevator doors opened and I stepped into the marble lobby, heels clicking like a metronome of finality. Security didn't say a word, didn't offer a goodbye, didn't even make eye contact. I wasn't just invisible now, I was radioactive. As I walked toward the revolving glass doors, I spotted them. Rachel and Brian standing near the east hallway by the stairwell. Senior managers, both of them handpicked. Both of them fully capable of taking over my role if they'd ever wanted to. But they didn't, because they believed in what we'd built. And maybe more importantly, they knew I had a plan. Brian looked up from his phone and gave a subtle nod. Rachel, ever more theatrical, offered a two-fingered salute like she was clocking out of a job she'd already buried, and they vanished behind the stairwell door. I stepped into the sunlight, and the weight that had camped out on my shoulders for the past 6 months lifted like a fog burning off a lake. I didn't smile, didn't cry, didn't feel anything loud, just a low thrum in my chest, a bass line of anticipation. I didn't get in my car right away. I leaned against it, watched, waited. At 10:17, a junior associate left the building. He didn't rush, he wasn't crying. He just walked out, rolled up his badge, and dropped it gently into the landscaping mulch like a dead leaf returning to the dirt. Then another, then three more. By 10:24, the receptionist was on the phone, swiveling her chair like a confused meerkat. From my angle, I could see through the glass. Conference room lights flickering to life, people standing up mid-call, glancing around like someone had pulled the fire alarm with no smoke. At 10:28, Ryan walked out carrying nothing but his phone and a half-finished protein shake. He looked at me and said, "Told you he'd go full idiot." Behind him, Rachel followed, lugging a company-issued laptop and one very dead desk plant. She paused next to my car. "You still drink that weird herbal crap you keep in your desk?" "Only on Mondays," I said. "It's Tuesday." She smiled. "See you at the other side." One by one, they all left. No drama, no shouting. Just an eerie procession of competence leaving the building like oxygen exiting a room. One woman left a post-it on her monitor that read, "Try asking Chad." Someone else printed their resignation on the back of a lunch menu and taped it to their chair. And then, around 10:33, I saw it, what I'd hoped but never asked for. A single sheet of paper resting neatly on the edge of the front desk. Printer paper. Nothing flashy, just black text. A header. Employee Agreement Diana Farrell Consulting LLC signed. Dated, legally binding. Left there like a breadcrumb for legal to find when they started asking questions, which they would. Oh, they definitely would. I got in my car and drove off without music. No need to set a mood. The mood was already perfect. Back in that building, panic would be blooming like mold. People would be realizing that emails were going unanswered. Clients were calling, confused. Laptops were abandoned mid-sync. Shared drives were going dark. All those exit interviews they thought they'd be scheduling, not happening. All that institutional knowledge they thought they owned, walked out the door in well-tailored silence. And Chad was probably still in the conference room, waiting for someone to bring him coffee, waiting for someone to brief him on what just happened. Only no one was coming, because his team wasn't his. Never was. Chad's first mistake was assuming I'd want revenge. His second was assuming silence meant surrender. By 11 o'clock a.m., he was pacing the executive floor like a man trying to reassemble a plane midair, with duct tape, a broken manual, and no goddamn wings. The first 20 minutes he spent on calls to legal, barking words like breach, retaliation, and chain of custody, without actually understanding what any of them meant. Legal didn't flinch, just asked one question. Did she sign a non-compete? And when he said, I gave it to her this morning, the silence that followed could have cracked glass. Meanwhile, I was home on my couch, eating grapes and watching reruns of The Golden Girls, because that's what you do when you're technically unemployed and completely unbothered. At 11:17, the IT department got pulled in. Chad demanded they lock down the system, revoke all access, change all admin permissions. Tried, but they couldn't find a single system user listed under my name or any of my core team's names. Because years ago, I'd asked IT to assign everyone's system aliases through DFC LLC, justified as streamlined vendor visibility. They agreed. It reduced liability, made offboarding contractors easier. Only now it meant that no one knew who had access to what or how to reverse it. At 11:35, the first client email came in. Subject line where is Brian? Is Diana still POC? By noon, the account managers left in the office were being bombarded. Confused clients, canceled calls, Slack channels abandoned. One VP tried to assure a major legacy partner that everything was under control. The client replied with a screenshot of a LinkedIn status that showed half the client solutions team had updated their workplace to consulting open for business. The caption, same team, same service. New name, no logo, no company name, just breadcrumbs. The CFO stormed into legal's office by 12:45, red-faced and breathing like someone who'd just jogged up a mountain. She held a spreadsheet in her hand, Q3 projections. We're short, she snapped. 42% short, and climbing. Legal, ever the embodiment of Xanax, just adjusted her glasses and said, have you reviewed their contracts? Of course I haven't reviewed their contracts. Not legal? Well, we have, or rather we are now. She pulled a folder from her drawer and opened it like a magician about to saw someone in half. Page 1, Independent Contractor Agreement Diana Farrell Consulting LLC. The CFO stared at it, then blinked, then asked the question that was already ricocheting through half the executive team's heads. Wait, who technically employed them? No one answered, because no one actually knew. It'd all been so comfortable letting me handle the onboarding, the HR documentation, the vendor terms, the renewals. I made everything run smooth, too smooth, like a trick tablecloth tug where the dishes don't move until the table collapses. At 1:00 p.m., Chad scheduled an all-hands, or tried to. Only 9 people showed up, half of them interns, one guy from facilities who thought it was about air conditioning, and the office dog someone forgot to put on a leash. He started his speech anyway, rambling about staying the course, team resilience, and opportunity in disruption. But even the projector refused to connect, throwing up a blue screen like it was embarrassed for him. Someone in the back asked, where's Rachel? No answer. Another asked, who's managing client A? Still no answer. A brave soul near the front mumbled, do we still have client A? At 1:47. Reply all email went out from a senior client. We've decided to continue working with Diana and her team. Please terminate our current engagement effective immediately. No drama, just business, and still I said nothing. No press release, no interviews, not even a tweet, because when you've planned for a storm, you don't yell over the thunder. You wait. Let the winds speak for you. By 2:10 p.m., the war room had become a mausoleum with Wi-Fi. The whiteboard, once used for quarterly sales strategies and buzzword vomit like client re-engagement funnel, now bore hastily scrawled numbers in red marker, projected losses, headcount gaps, contract term dates. A scribbled, next to client solutions staffing model felt like the most honest thing Chad had written all week. Legal sat at the long end of the conference table, flipping through a binder like she was reading an obituary. In a way, she was. The company's operational backbone, its very bloodline, had been built on a foundation no one actually understood, because no one had bothered to ask. Let's walk through this again, Chad growled, rubbing his temples like they owed him money. How the hell is this possible? The general counsel didn't even blink. She came in through her LLC. It was in the records. Buried, yes, but not hidden. She was staff, Chad shouted. She had a desk. Legal slid a contract across the table like a death certificate. It was crisp, not even a coffee stain. Titled, Master Services Agreement Diana Farrell Consulting LLC effective date, 9 years ago, term, rolling unless terminated. Clauses, custom, surgical, written by someone who understood corporate leverage like a symphony. Every one of her key staff, subcontracted. Every system login, authorized via vendor access. Every client onboarding doc, processed under her firm's stamp. And the non-compete clauses Chad had flung around like legal holy water? Legal turned to page 9 of the binder, index finger tapping as if reading from a gospel. Non-compete limitations are defined in Section 8, which explicitly tie enforcement to termination initiated by Diana Farrell Consulting LLC or its representatives. Not the parent company. Not executive leadership. Not you. He went pale. Man not used to losing, and certainly not used to being outplayed. I want injunctions filed. I want her stopped, he barked. The general counsel leaned in, dropped her voice low, and delivered the sentence that changed everything. We don't own them. Beat, we never did. The room cracked in half. It wasn't just that they couldn't stop me. It was that they never had the authority to begin with. 9 years. 9 years of me being referred to as employee, head of, director of an internal comms, but the paperwork told a different story. I was a ghost in the system, vital but untouchable. A vendor with legal insulation and a Rolodex of clients loyal to me, not the letterhead. Chad slammed a fist on the table, but it landed like a toddler tantrum, hollow and impotent. Why wasn't this flagged? He barked. Legal raised an eyebrow, because we were never looped in. The contracts were signed by your predecessor, and if I may remind you, you approved the last renewal. A silence dropped over the table like a guillotine blade. One of the junior VPs, who'd only joined 6 months prior and still had that I can fix this glint in his eye, cleared his throat and said, "Can't we negotiate with her? I mean, maybe we offer to buy the contracts back or from herself?" Chad snapped. "You want to pay her for what she just stole?" Another silence. Then someone in legal whispered, almost sympathetically, "She didn't steal anything. You gave it away." Meanwhile, back at my apartment, I was sipping tea from a chipped mug and scrolling through congratulatory DMs from former clients. One read, "Took me 2 hours to figure out how to cancel with them. Took me 2 seconds to follow you." I didn't reply, but I did smile. Because vengeance isn't always fire and brimstone. Sometimes it's a whisper in a boardroom that makes a man like Chad realize he didn't lose control. He never had it. At 3 o'clock p.m., while Chad was still shouting into speakerphones like volume equaled authority, I was in my kitchen, barefoot, calmly refreshing the state's online business registration portal. Entity name, Farrell & Co. Client Strategy Group LLC status, approved, a fresh name. Clean EIN. New compliance filing submitted before lunch. I hadn't even brushed my hair yet. The beauty of building slowly is that when it's time to move fast, you don't panic, you execute. I already had the structure, the tools, the team. All I needed was a banner to march under, and I'd just sewn it together in less than 6 clicks. By 3:14, I sent out the offer letters, customized, respectful, precise. Everyone who walked out with me received an email titled, "Let's keep building." It included everything: salary matches, bonus schedules, a note reminding them their health benefits would resume uninterrupted, and a thank you, not some HR drafted, legally proofed drivel, just 3 sentences from me. "You trusted me. You didn't have to. I won't forget it." The replies came fast. Rachel, all in. "Brian, can I start today?" Janelle, already cleared out my inbox. "Let's go." I'd already reserved a modest co-working suite across town, nothing fancy, just space with real coffee, working AC, and windows that opened. By 4 o'clock, I was forwarding Slack invites. The new shared drive spun up, calendars synced, and then came the part I knew would twist the knife, the transition emails, each one signed by a familiar face. No logos, no threats, no digs, just a subject line, "Update to your client success contact." We weren't poaching, we were continuing. The same service, the same people, same hands on the wheel, just a better route. The first real reply came from our biggest client. Let's call them Norwell Systems, $8 million annually. They'd been with us since year 3. I personally onboarded their CTO back when they still used fax machines. The reply read, "We'll be moving with Diana. Please send updated billing info." No hesitation. No request for a call. Just like that, done. Back at HQ, Chad was mid-email when legal flagged an old message unearthed from a backup server, buried in an archived project folder dated 3 years prior. From Chad Whitmore to CFO, legal, HR subject, DFC renewal approval body, no issues. We'll keep running it through her LLC, it saves us a W-2. Attached was a PDF of the renewed vendor agreement, signed by Chad himself. Twice, apparently, because the first signature came out wobbly. Now, that email lived in 2 places, their server and mine. It wasn't just poetic justice. It was ironclad evidence that everything was above board, and everything happening now was simply the natural conclusion of a system they built without understanding it. I didn't need to threaten litigation. I didn't need to go public. I let their own fingerprints do the damage. All I did was lift the veil. And the veil was very, very thin. That night, I sat in my newly leased office, well, part of it. The keycards wouldn't be activated until Thursday. So I sat on a folding chair, legs crossed, watching the city lights flicker through a dusty window. Laptop on a cardboard box. Phone buzzing nonstop. Half the inbox filled with the words, "We're coming with you." I didn't cry, didn't gloat. Just let the quiet fill the space. That's the thing about escape plans. They only look reckless from the outside. But when you've been planning the exit for years, it just feels like walking through a door you already knew was open. By 8:07 the next morning, Chad had already broken his personal record for emails sent before coffee. He was spiraling, pinging HR, legal, PR, even the facilities manager like somehow a malfunctioning elevator, was why half the revenue pipeline had vanished overnight. His latest threat came via email titled "Immediate Legal Action IP Retention plus Client Interference." It read like a tantrum written in caps lock with a thesaurus open. Words like theft, coercion, and reputational damage were thrown around like confetti at a pity party. I didn't respond, not out of fear, out of strategy. You never interrupt a man while he's undermining himself. Instead, I watched. Chad had reached the bargaining stage of grief, only he skipped over acceptance and landed somewhere between delusion and desperation. He tried strong-arming PR into issuing a press release, painting me as a disgruntled former employee, attempting hostile client acquisition. He even called one of his old frat brothers who worked at a middling tech blog and fed him a half-baked story about vendor sabotage. It never ran, because when the journalist asked for supporting documentation, PR froze. HR went ghost, and legal issued a simple, sterile statement to the board. No wrongdoing occurred. The structure was inherited. That word, inherited, cut deeper than any accusation. It said, we knew, we just didn't look. It also meant we're not backing Chad. HR, who had gleefully escorted me out of the building not 24 hours earlier, now couldn't remember what room we'd been in. Melissa suddenly had no comment on the termination. One director sent me a LinkedIn message at 9:23 a.m. that read, I always respected your leadership. Just know some of us saw what was happening. Spare me the late arriving conscience. You don't get to be Switzerland after a corporate drive-by. By noon, the board convened an emergency session. Remote, no minutes, just damage control. 3 of the biggest clients had formally withdrawn, each referencing continuity concerns and trust in personnel. Translation, we're sticking with Diana. And then, for the first time since the exit, I spoke. A mid-tier industry blog had reached out the night before. Nothing splashy, just a quiet publication for professionals who actually read contracts. I agreed to one quote. They asked, can you confirm if the client departures were coordinated? I said, the fine print was never hidden. That was it. One sentence. No fire, no fury, just fact. That was the shot heard round the boardroom. The quote ran quietly, like a whisper in a library. But those who needed to hear it did. At 2:03 p.m., another client terminated, then another. By 3:15, the revenue projections were revised again, and this time the CFO attached a subject line that simply read, reality check. Chad tried to rally, called a town hall for the remaining staff. Only 7 people showed. One of them was the janitor. Another was a guy from accounting who thought free donuts would be involved. He spoke for 12 minutes straight about loyalty, vision, recovery, but his voice cracked halfway through and someone in the back asked if we still had a marketing department. We didn't. At 4:47 p.m., I received an email from an old client. It said they called us, begged us to stay. We declined. Just thought you'd want to know. I closed my laptop. No gloating, no response. Just the slow, satisfying understanding that I hadn't burned anything. I just walked away and let the match fall on a floor soaked in their own arrogance. The board call was at 6 o'clock p.m. sharp. Emergency status. No assistance. No chit-chat. Just a grid of silent, blinking faces staring into webcams like a seance for the company's fading soul. On paper, the agenda was titled Revenue Deviation Mitigation. But in reality, it might as well have read, how did one woman dismantle us without raising her voice? The CFO started with the numbers, grim and unsweetened. Current client withdrawal totals represent approximately 68.3% of recurring revenue, projected to breach 70% by end of week if current trajectory holds. One board member, a real estate mogul with a frozen smile and dead shark eyes, finally muttered what everyone else had been thinking since Tuesday. She wasn't a department. Beat. She was the infrastructure. Chad, somehow still invited to the call, was sweating through his collar. His usual swagger had evaporated, leaving only a pale, twitching shell of a man who couldn't tell whether the floor had disappeared or if he just never had one to stand on in the first place. He tried to speak, something about external disruptions and contractual misalignment, but the chairman waved a hand. No more buzzwords, Chad, she said coolly. Just resign. Silence. Then wordlessly he clicked leave meeting, and that was it. No parade, no tantrum. Just the sound of a door closing on a man who thought title equaled power and forgot that some empires don't announce themselves until they've already replaced your foundation. Meanwhile, across town in my modest office, still half-furnished, still missing blinds, I stood with a mug of tea in one hand, looking at a single-page press update drafted by Rachel and Brian. It was simple, elegant, Farrell & Co., announcing new multi-client retainer package, same strategy. Same team, better terms, below it just one understated sentence, now accepting limited new clients. No bragging, no victory laps, just an open door and a clear message: we didn't steal your clients, you lost them. By 7:45, the post had already gone semi-viral in niche LinkedIn circles. People were whisper sharing it like a forbidden recipe. Wait, isn't this the group that? Weren't they all fired last week? No, not fired. Liberated. One former partner posted a comment, worked with Diana's team for 6 years. Never seen a smoother transition. Zero hiccups, top-tier pros. Would recommend without hesitation. Another chimed in, funny how silence can be louder than spin. At 8:10 p.m., I closed my laptop. The inbox was full. 3 more inquiries, one from a client we'd been chasing for years. I didn't even open it. Instead, I walked to the big window overlooking the parking lot, where only a few cars remained. My team was still inside, eating Thai takeout off mismatched plates, laughing about something that had absolutely nothing to do with revenue or NDAs or nervous breakdowns in conference rooms. That's when I realized something. They weren't just following me. They chose me again, not because I promised them stability, but because I'd shown them how to build it ourselves. The company I left, they had offices and investors and press kits, but I had the people, and now I had the clients too. The message came in at 9:17 a.m. No subject line, just a blinking dot in the corner of my screen from a number I hadn't seen in months. From CEO Atold Company. Calm body, Diana, would you consider consulting with us during this transition? Happy to discuss terms that reflect your value. I stared at it for a full 10 seconds, not out of surprise, out of sheer, unfiltered disbelief that they still hadn't learned a damn thing. Reflect your value. Now you want to reflect my value. When I brought in Norwell's $8M renewal, my bonus was capped. When I retained a churn risk client with a single call, no one noticed. When I built the infrastructure that held their entire bottom line together, they called me old school. And when Chad fired me, they cheered him on. Now, bleeding out and hemorrhaging talent, they wanted me to patch their wounds. I didn't get angry. Anger is loud, messy, temporary. I got surgical. I typed exactly 7 words, send it to the firm. Standard rates apply, then I blocked the number, permanently. No drama, no pithy quote, just silence delivered like a scalpel through ego. I turned back to the office. Brian was running a sync call with 3 new clients, whiteboard behind him already covered in color-coded timelines. Rachel had a laptop open and was onboarding our newest hire, a referral from a client who left the old firm last night and emailed me personally to say, "Your silence taught us who really mattered." The air was humming, not with urgency, with momentum. Every desk was occupied, every Slack channel buzzing, every client request answered before it could gather dust. I walked past my desk, still a bit chaotic, a fresh vase of flowers clashing with a stack of compliance printouts, and poured myself a cup of coffee. Same kind I drank for years in that old building, but this time it tasted different. Warmer, cleaner. I stepped to the window. It wasn't much of a view, just a shared parking lot with a strip mall across the street. But the glass was clean, and the light hit just right. Below me, the world moved on, fast, ruthless, unapologetic, but in this small office above a dry cleaner and a dentist who always played Bon Jovi at full volume, something different was happening. We weren't surviving, we were winning. I sat down, opened my laptop. The company dashboard popped up, client portals, billing summaries, performance metrics. All green, in the corner. A single widget blinked. Week 1, complete. I smiled. Not the kind you force for HR headshots. The kind that settles in your bones. The kind that says, "You thought I needed you to build this?" No, I needed them gone, so I could build something that would never forget who built it. Thanks for watching, you cubicle warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old boss, then you're on your own. Revenge of the coffee pot strikes again.